Okay, so this is the Ascaso Dream PID. This has been my daily driver espresso machine for the past 3 months, and I figured it was probably time for me to put out a review just to give some feedback, because there's really not a ton out there on these machines. So you'll see them around. I've seen several people ask about them. I know whenever I was researching this machine, I didn't really find a whole lot as far as high quality kind of independent reviews of this machine. There are a few. On YouTube, there's a handful of videos, but some of the most in-depth appear to be in German, and I don't speak German, so that wasn't very helpful. Most of the other videos came from resellers, and so that wasn't really what I was looking for. So hopefully this video will be useful for anybody who's considering purchasing one of these machines. Now, we'll say this is going to be a bit of a thorough and probably long video because, again, there's just not that much out there on these machines, so I want to cover as much as possible for people. I don't want people to feel like they don't have the information they need to make a decision about whether or not you really want this machine. So let me start off with just the too long didn't watch, right? The summary version of what I really think about this machine. Overall, I think it's a decent espresso machine. It's certainly capable of making good espresso. It has a really good feature set. It's got PID temperature control that's easily adjustable. It comes with pre-infusion, which is also adjustable. So you can get up to, I think, 5 or 8 seconds or something of pre-infusion on this machine. It has a pretty fast heat up cycle, and so you can go from off to making espresso. For me, by the time I get my dose ground and tamped and ready to go, the machine is warmed up and ready to make espresso. And from the espresso shot over to making steam so that you can froth some milk, also fairly quick. So it's a fairly quick machine from off to having a drink in your hand. Another feature that it has is volumetric dosing. So once you get your shot set, and it's capable of making a single or a double. And so once you get those doses set, it will volumetrically set your next espresso shot. So you should hopefully be able to get some fairly automatic consistency as far as the volume of your doses. This machine also is very easily adjustable for pressure. So it's got a pressure gauge here, and there's adjustment under the machine on this side where you can, with a screwdriver, easily adjust whatever max pressure you want the machine to run at. It has very solid build quality, I think. Most of what you see that is powder-coated red is actually cast aluminum. So it's got a metal base, all stainless accessories. The appointments comes with a nice wood handle here, no burn, steam wand. Again, it's a very solid package. I don't see any kind of chintzy, cheaped out parts on this espresso machine. It has a pretty small footprint, so it's going to have no problem fitting under your cabinets. It's not very wide. It's not very deep. It's not going to take up a ton of space on your countertop. And the last, and maybe even the most obvious thing, is its appearance. I think it looks pretty good. Now, some people do not like how this machine looks. That's a matter of taste, but it is pretty unique. It's very focused on aesthetics compared to most espresso machines kind of in its price and feature set range, which are kind of the stainless box design. This has a very different and kind of unique aesthetic quality, which I like, and that's one of the reasons, frankly, that I bought it. I thought it looked good, and given its feature set, I thought, well, maybe that's a machine for me. Now, the downside. To me, the size, it being a small machine, is kind of a benefit and a negative, in that small side has some compromises. There's not a lot of deck height in between the group head and the drip tray. So you're not going to be able to put big mugs underneath this thing once you have a portafilter in place. I also find that the user experience sometimes is a little frustrating. The way the drip tray comes out, you're going to remove this little grill, and then I've even got some water in here. So you've got a drain tube in the way that if you leave in, you can't just lift the tray out. And the tray does not slide out. You have to lift it out. So if this thing, has just vented some hot water, that tube's going to possibly be kind of warm, but you have to move it out of the way in order to get the drip tray out, or you kind of have to Jenga this thing around. And so I'm going to be very careful here not to drip any water. You can see it starts hitting there, so I kind of have to angle it. And if this tray is very full, it's really easy to spill water. And so that's maybe one of the most day-to-day frustrating things, is that the drip tray is small because it's a small machine, so it doesn't have a big drip tray. And when you go to empty it, it's kind of a hassle to get that tray in and out without spilling water if you've ran, a couple of shots and it's got some water in it. The steam is pretty powerful, but I find that it's kind of wet, and so you really have to purge the steam system quite a bit before you start frothing milk, or you might end up with a little bit of wet milk. The volumetric dosing on the machine, even though it's a good feature, I find to be a little untrustworthy. And whenever it works, I do seem to get very consistent shot volumes, but it seems to kind of interact with the pressure. And if this thing starts to max out wherever you've got the overpressure valve set, well, in that case, the volumetric dosing is not quite as reliable. So I think overall, I think it's a pretty good machine. However, I wouldn't recommend this machine if you're somebody that's going to be making a lot of espresso kind of back to back at the same time. If you're just going to make a couple of shots at a time, it's pretty good. If you're going to be making, 4 or 5 shots at a time for a bunch of people, I think that's probably where it's weak, because your drip tray is not very big. And if you're purging your group head every time you do a shot to clean out, the group head and get all the grounds out, you're going to have a lot of water, and that drip tray is going to fill up, and then it's just kind of a problem. And so also, I would say switching back from steam to pulling a shot, you also need to vent that group head. And so with that small tray, it kind of limits its ability for me to make a lot of espresso efficiently. I really wish, they would sacrifice a little bit of aesthetics and maybe, make this tray a pull-out. You could put some seams, right there, and that would probably allow for a much larger tray and one that would be easy to pull out and dump. And that would actually change my feelings about the machine quite a bit. Because again, that's one of the most frustrating things on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so let's do a little overview about the machine and what it comes with. So obviously, in the box, you get the machine, and you get a nice little accessory kit in this box. So what's in this box? You get a printed manual, and the manual is actually in 4 languages, but it's pretty decent manual. And again, paper is always nice. That way you don't have to go online and look up or download the instructions. So you get your portafilter, and this, I think, is a really high quality piece. I believe this is walnut wood accents, which matches the steam valve handle. Pretty heavy duty. And so this is, again, a very high quality, nice portafilter. This is standard size, so you can use any regular portafilter basket. So for instance, if I've got a basket out of a Rancilio, I can drop that in and it fits just fine into my portafilter. It comes with a large selection of portafilter baskets. One of them is actually for Nespresso pods. So you get 2 7-gram baskets, a single wall and a double wall. You get 2 14-gram baskets, a single wall and a double wall. And you get a blind basket for purging and setting pressure on the machine. So it's a pretty healthy stack of baskets. Now, for me, I would have liked to have had a bit of a larger basket. I never use the singles, and the 14-gram isn't really enough. I tend to put more of an 18-gram dose. So I actually use an IMS basket rather than these accessories. But I will say, it's not like they're skimping out. They provide a lot of different baskets. The tamper that comes with the machine is also very high quality. It's just a solid block of stainless steel. It's dual-ended, and I believe the ends are ever so slightly different diameters. However, I will say neither one fits the baskets exceptionally precisely, so it's not like, you know, this is a 58.5 millimeter and it's just going to scrape the walls of your portafilter basket so that you don't get any, you know, loose grounds coming up the sides. It doesn't fit as tight as I would like, but again, I can't fault the quality. Again, it's a big, solid chunk of metal. You know, you're never going to break that. Now, it also comes with this plastic scoop, which I don't know, you know, if I was them, I would just leave this out because, you know, in this range of machine, this is really not adding anything but useless expense. Now, but I mean, again, who's using this thing? And in the machine is also one packet of descaler. So they include one for free. Again, you know, that's fine. You know, whether or not you really need that, again, if you're buying this class machine, who knows? But it's always nice to have a little bit of cleaner on hand. Now, another thing that I'll mention is the power cable is kind of adjustable in length in that you can tuck that thing underneath the base of the machine. The base under here is actually hollow, and so where the cord comes in underneath the machine, you can feed the cord up in so that you don't have you know, stray cord coming out the back. And the cord is fairly long. I haven't measured it, but I would say you're at least getting probably a meter or 3 feet of cord. That's kind of my guess. Whenever I was, you know, coiling mine up inside, you do kind of have to loop it. It's long enough. You're not just going to shove it in. You do have to make kind of a couple of loops inside the machine. That is one of the weird things, which I will show you, is underneath the drip tray is just open. And so there's kind of a fiberboard base underneath to keep the cord contained. But then the cord can just come up in this area. Now, you know, it's rubber sealed. I don't think there's any problem with, you know, water getting in the cable or anything. But again, you know, it's just kind of weird. And maybe if they just put a little divider right here internally, that would keep that cord from coming in. That would give them more room up front to, again, put in a bigger drip tray. And the last thing I'll mention is when you get the machine, it does come with a decent warranty. You get 12 months on the entire unit, and you get 5 years on the thermal block inside. So this machine I bought through Ascaso USA, their website. It actually comes from Espresso parts. So it's worth noting Espresso parts is Ascaso USA, same company. I believe they probably just have the distribution rights in the United States. And if you look on the website, it says that the warranty is only valid if you have the original box. Now, this is, you know, a small espresso machine, but espresso machines are not small. So the box for this thing is a very large box. And so I actually contacted them about that, and their response was, if you have an issue, they will work with you. If you don't have the original box, that could delay any warranty work because they will have to send you shipping materials to return the machine. So I actually don't think that is necessary. And I will say, I think they should change that language on the website. It seems a little ridiculous to require somebody to keep a very large empty box. And again, especially if that's not actually required, because again, you're kind of warning people to keep a box, which actually then on the back end you say isn't necessary. So I would remove that writing on the warranty on their website. So let's look at the control system on this machine. So you have 3 switches. This is the on-off switch, and the machine does warm up pretty quickly whenever you flip it on. The next button here in the middle, if you lift it up, that will be for a single dose. If you push it down, that will be for a double. This is also how you program the volumetric functions. You program the machine by lifting up and holding, and then you wait, and once your shot is ran, you let go, and it will retain that program. So if you push it down, that is to set the double shot. If you lift it up, that's to set the single shot. And then when you want to use them, you can just bump the switch and it will run whatever the last setting was on the volumetric dosing. The last switch, if you flip it down, will turn on the steam, and so it will start, warm up, and get the steam going. If you lift it up, that will be the hot water setting. So you don't get separate hot water. They're controlled by the same thing. And I've not used it, but I'm pretty sure the hot water just comes out of the steam wand. Now on the steam valve is here on the right with this wood handle. I've found that it's actually a very nice little setup. You see you got a little warm water already left in there. Close that back up, make sure that's tight. This, I feel it has been a very easy to control steam valve. It's got quite a bit of room, and if you want to restrict your steam, it's pretty easy to do it. I haven't had any problems yet. So that's your steam valve where you can open and close the steam after it's warmed up and the pump's going. The wand itself, I feel is fine. Always I feel like steam wands could have a little bit more range of travel. This one, you can see this is as high as it goes. And the one thing that's weird is it will actually hit the drip tray cover. So whenever you stow this thing, you kind of have to swing it around to pull it inside, which is a little weird. So I guess, there's a trade-off. Do you want it longer, or do you want it kind of more convenient to move around? But again, it's just kind of odd that isn't consistent with the height of the machine. As far as the angle, it does kind of come out, and it is hard because, like, if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to come up and I'm going to set a pitcher in here, and I've got a 350 milliliter Mata, stainless pitcher here, you can see that it's just, there's no way. It just can't work. So you do have to, lift this thing up, you put your pitcher in, and then I can kind of rest it here on the corner. But if I'm really wanting to vary the depth, I have to pull this thing kind of out so that I can froth milk. So again, that's just a compromise because it's a small machine. There's only so much room for them to actually put stuff. And so one of the compromises is, again, this is not a large, frothing jug. This little container, at its highest point, this thing is 4 inches. And, if we flip that over for the metrics among us, right at 103, 102.5 millimeters. So it's not a big jug. So within the PID, just a few things, because I'm not going to go all the way through all the details of how to use the PID. The instructions are in the manual, but you can adjust your brew temperature. You cannot adjust the steam temperature, but you can adjust the temperature and it's PID controlled. You can also flip from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So if you want it in Fahrenheit, you can adjust that inside of the controls. You can adjust the pre-infusion settings, so you can either turn it off, or you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 seconds of pre-infusion. I've currently got it set to 5 seconds, and that's the max pre-infusion that the machine will run. You can also turn the timer on and off. And one thing I'll say about the timer is when you run a shot, it just calculates the time that shot is running. It doesn't do timed shots. The other thing is once your shot is finished, that timer goes away pretty quick. So you've kind of got to be watching it to even know how long your shot ran. I wish they'd give you a few more seconds of display before that chronometer turns off. This machine also has automatic standby, and that is adjustable within the PID menu. And what that means is if you leave the machine sitting and it's on, it will eventually shut itself off and it will go to sleep. And so you can adjust that from half an hour to an hour or 2 hours. How long do you want the machine to stay on before it automatically shuts itself off? And that's pretty good. Now, I will say at standby, it's pulling 11 watts. But once it cools off, it will fire up the thermal block to warm the water, and it's going to try to maintain that heat. It's pretty well insulated. It does not cool down very quickly, but it's just worth noting if you're worried about power consumption. So right there, it just clicked on. and it boosted up and it hit 700 watts draw for a little bit as it was maintaining the 98 degrees Celsius that I have it set at. And so if you're worried about power consumption, it will kick on and keep itself warm, but you can set that turn off timer so that after a couple hours, if you haven't needed it, it will go to sleep. And again, if you want it 1 hour or half an hour, or just turn it off and then it would stay on continuously. There's also a setting for temperature differential. So if you actually measure the temperature coming out of the shower and it's a little off, you can adjust a temperature differential in the machine. And so that's all what's contained in the PID. My last comment is I wish the industry would get away from the tiny 3-digit PID 2-button interface. This is a pretty common little interface, and quite frankly, in 2022, I just think we can do a lot better. You know, if you look at all the different availability of computer-controlled hardware with Arduinos and everything else, you can just do so much better than a little 2-button tiny little interface, which is hard to see. It makes the menus weird because of the way they have to do the characters to represent letters, and you can only get 3. And I wish they'd do a little bit better. These displays are not that expensive. You could put a 4-line display in here with multiple characters for $5 probably. It really doesn't take much, so I do wish they'd do a little bit better with the interface. And again, you know, I don't want to pick on Ascaso. This is everybody. Everybody uses these things in the espresso machine kind of world on these lower level PID controlled systems. So I guess maybe they're just that cheap, or it's just convenient, and I'm sure they're probably getting this stuff, you know, from some other manufacturer who makes the control system. So that's a nitpick, but that's not picking on Ascaso or this machine. That's just a general comment on the industry. So next up, let's talk about the feature set, because one of the reasons I bought the machine is I think it has a fairly compelling set of features. It's got a lot of things that I wanted in a machine. You know, whenever I was looking for a machine, one thing that I really wanted was a thermoblock design because I had a Breville before. You can see I've got another video out there on it, and I really like how fast they heat up, and I find that they deliver really good results. And I didn't want a machine that I had to wait minutes for the thing to warm up so that I'm standing around waiting on the machine when I'd like to have, you know, a cup of coffee or a cappuccino or something. And so this machine has a lot of really nice features. Already mentioned, it's got PID temperature control, so it's very consistent on its temperature, and it maintains that really well. It also does have pre-infusion, which a lot of machines don't have. It has volumetric dosing, which again is a feature that a lot of lower level machines, you know, in your $800 range don't have. It has that adjustable standby mode so that it will automatically shut itself off. And again, a lot of machines don't have that. It doesn't seem like that big of a feature, but you know, a lot of machines are very simple circuits inside, and this one has a little bit more brains, and it's able to save you some electricity in case you forget to turn the thing off. It is very fast with its thermoblock system. It warms up really quickly, and I find that by the time I weigh and grind my dose and get it tamped down, the machine's warmed up and ready to go. I can flip it on, do my little routine, you know, getting all my distribution stuff, get it tamped, boom, the machine's ready to go when I'm ready to go. So it does not hold me back if I want to make a drink. It also is pretty quick to get over to steam. Now, it does take a little bit of time, you know, so you're going to wait a minute or so to get the thing warmed up and ready to go to do steam, but it is fairly quick. Now, on that, I will say on the steam side, the downside of how this machine is made, it seems to be very, very well insulated inside. So the top does get warm, but whenever you go to steam and you froth milk and then you want to go back and make another drink, if you don't purge the group head, it's going to take forever. I actually was making a video on this and gave up because I waited for like 8 minutes and the thing still hadn't cooled back down. Now, when you do purge the machine, it does cool down much quicker. But you are wasting some water whenever you do that. Then you fill up your drip tray, which is small. And so that can be a bit of a hassle. But in case you are trying to, go from frothing milk back to making another drink, it'll do it fairly quickly, but you do have to drain that group head out and get all the hot water out, or it's going to be forever until it cools off. It also does have adjustable pressure, and so you see it's got a nice little pressure gauge there on the front. It reads in both pounds per square inch in small numbers, and the big numbers are in bar. So I currently have this machine set to cap at 9 bar. And the way you adjust this is you have to put in your portafilter with a blind basket, and then you run a dose and you watch and you adjust the OPV valve, which is right here on the front. Let me get the video down there so that you can see that. So here we go, underneath the front of the machine. Right there, there's a big flat screwdriver adjustment for the OPV valve. So that adjustment process I find to be very easy and convenient. And one thing I will talk about with the pressure adjustment is the way the pressure interacts with the volumetric dosing. Again, this is something that I emailed Ascaso USA, or Espresso Parts, about because I was having some inconsistency with the volumetric dosing. And what I think is going on, based on the feedback they gave me, which wasn't super comprehensive, they told me to adjust the pressure up to about 11 bars. But it seems like what happens is whenever you hit the limit on the OPV, obviously it's going to vent some pressure off, right, to keep it from going through the portafilter. Now, the downside is I think the flow measurement is occurring on the side of the water system before the OPV valve. And so what I think is happening is it's measuring flow, even some of the water that's going out the OPV vent, rather than the measurement being after the OPV, measuring water just going through the group head. And so that's a bit of a frustrating thing because it can throw off your volumetric readings. And so the machine can, and what usually happens is you'll end up with a short shot if you're using the automatic setting. Because if you get a bit of a tight tamp and you're maxing out the pressure, it's measuring water flow thinking, oh, you're getting flow, even though some of that may be dumping out the OPV. So that's one problem. Now, I have actually stopped using volumetric dosing, and now I use, a scale underneath my cups. And so I measure, live kind of weight of my shot. But I'll point out in a moment why that is kind of a pain in the ass. Okay, so let's look at some power draw and sound measurements. Let me get into what I like about this machine. Things that, I find to be very nice. Number one, this was perhaps one of the most aesthetics-driven decisions that I have ever made. I'm not really an aesthetics-oriented person, but I really liked, I thought the machine looked cool. It's kind of nice, right, the way it works. I liked the feature set. Now, it's not a cheap machine. It's like $1,250. But with the set of features, that's not too bad. It's hard to find a machine other than a Breville that has as many features as this thing has at its price point. Now, the market is getting more competitive, but, machines that have fewer features than this are usually in the $800 range. Once you get above $1,000, it seems like, things just jump up to like $1,500. And so this is a little cheaper than the $1,500 range, and it has a lot of the features that I wanted, such as volumetric dosing, pre-infusion, easy OPV adjustment, it's PID controlled, all this stuff that it's got, I liked. One of the main reasons that I got this machine was because of speed. I really like thermoblock or thermocoil designs because of how fast they are. I got kind of spoiled with the Breville at how quickly you could use the machine. This one is similar. It's maybe not quite as fast as the Breville, but it's pretty fast. Now, some people don't like thermoblocks. They may think that they're inferior. I actually think going forward, I think more and more people should be using them because of how efficient they are. And they actually allow for really precise control over temperatures. The thermoblock inside of this is all stainless. Again, it's a very well-built machine, in my opinion, as far as the quality of what they've done. I like the wood accents, I like the stainless, I like the accessory package. It's a very well-constructed machine, a well-appointed machine. I like the amount of control and adjustment you have. You can adjust the temperature, you can adjust the pressure, you can adjust the volumetric dosing, you can adjust your pre-infusion. You've got really fine control over the steam valve. It's a machine that allows you a lot of control over what you're doing, and so I do think that's a upside downside. You influence what you're doing. The machine doesn't do things for you. And if you set everything up and make a good shot, it makes a good shot. But it can be a little finicky because, well, it's kind of whatever you want it to be, which for me, I like. And then I also like how small it is. It doesn't take up a lot of room. That was another plus. I didn't want a gigantic machine, even though they may be awesome. I wanted something that would fit underneath my cabinets, that wouldn't take up a lot of space. I keep this thing with a grinder right beside it, and I didn't want my entire countertop dominated by an espresso machine. And so I find that this works pretty well for me. And overall, I would say I'm satisfied. I'm not thrilled, though. So let's talk about some of the things that I find frustrating and, the bad aspects of the machine. So the first thing I'll point out is that the size, while some benefits do come from it being small, there are some big downsides that you do need to be aware of. The first of which is deck height. Now let me put the portafilter in and let me see. So this does not have a basket in it, so it's not going to snug up super tight. But let me show you what happens if you try to put a regular coffee mug under this thing. So here I've got a pretty good sized mug. Move the steam wand. Yeah, it just doesn't fit really at all. You just can't do it. You really, with this machine, you just don't have much room at all. And so it's great if you're using regular, espresso or cappuccino cups. But if you've got anything very tall at all, with the portafilter in the machine, you can't get anything under it. So let me measure for you. So I fiddled this. I'm going to say roughly 70 millimeters is all you get from the drip tray cover to the bottom of this portafilter. Okay, like that's not much. That's like, it's less than 3 inches, like 2 3/4 inches is all you can get under there. And I mentioned earlier that I was actually using a scale underneath my shots. I am not using their very nice portafilter. I actually got a bottomless portafilter so that I could use a scale underneath my cups, because right now I don't have cappuccino cups. I had some on order. They've been back ordered for months because they're coming from Italy. And apparently supply chain is, blowed up everywhere. So I actually got this, I think this is a Rancilio. So this gives me a lot more deck height underneath the portafilter. And so I can use one of these little bitty skinny scales underneath my cups. And that's what I've had to do. Now I wanted the bottomless portafilter anyway. That way I could, try to do cool looking shots. And what I found out is I'm not good enough to do it, or either the coffee or my portafilter baskets aren't really that good at, making those cool looking espresso shots, but I still get good espresso out of the thing. So that's how I've actually gotten more height is, well, you can't use this. You have to use something with a lot less height. And you can see kind of the difference, right, of how much room you lose whenever you use a spout on your portafilter. Again, main gripe, drip tray, real small, very small, not just small, but since it's small, you have to dump it fairly regularly. And, well, the darn thing's just kind of finicky to get in and out of there, right? Because, I mean, if you just lift straight up, the drain tube is in the way. And so you kind of got to angle the thing to get it out. And, again, I'm sitting there looking at the cord whenever I pull this thing out. You can see how big the drip tray is, right? I mean, this thing, it doesn't hold a whole lot. And it gets in the way, right? There's just no height. You can't even get the wand underneath the machine. Very small. Volumetric dosing. Again, like I said, I have found it to be somewhat unreliable if you run up close to where your OPV is set. Again, I think that the way it works is just not how I would try it. Now, there may just be a problem with the flow sensors and the way they're made, just may not work if you put them in the wrong spot. And so maybe that's the only way it can be, but it's just not what I want it to be, right? I want the volumetric dosing to measure the amount of water that's coming through the group head. And it seems to not do that sometimes, or at least it's not reliably doing that. As far as the steam, I would say that my frustration, it took me a while to get steam on this machine figured out. The biggest problem is you really got to purge the thing. It keeps kind of some water sometimes. Let me see if I open this thing up, if it'll drip. I think I've already drained it a couple times making this video. But, once you flip over and start making steam, the first several seconds have a lot of water in them. And so I find that I purge the thing for like 5 to 10 seconds. I really wait to get dry steam before I start frothing milk. And at that point, you get some water, but it's steam. You're always going to get some water. And it took me probably a good month of messing around before I figured out what was really going on and why I wasn't getting great milk texture. And now I feel like I'm doing okay. But again, I'm not going to say that the steam is wet. You just really got to purge the thing to get it over to dry. And the last little annoyance that I will point out is with the water reservoir. Now, the water reservoir, I haven't shown, it just pulls out the side here, and you can see it's got a little feed tube. And, it's fine. It's not huge, but it works. The problems I have with the way they've designed it is it only goes in this side. It can't go out the other side. There's stuff over there. I think the thermoblock or something's on that side. Anyway, so you only get access to one side, which means you cannot really put anything right here beside it because it blocks that out. It's not huge, but it's not tiny. I think the manual says it holds 1.3 liters of water. And so I've got to, it's just me making espresso for myself. I got to change that water. I got to refill it maybe every couple days, every 2 or 3 days, I've got to refill the reservoir. That's not terrible. But, it would be nice to be able to use both sides, but I realized they would have to change the entire way the machine is designed. But, it does mean that I'm kind of restricted. I can't put stuff at the back right side of the machine, or if I do, then I'm pulling this thing out and trying to pour water in it, and then you spill, and that's kind of frustrating. But the other thing about the way the tank is designed is that whenever the pump runs, whenever you're like pulling a shot, it kind of vibrates. And this thing will vibrate, and it will sometimes I'll see it and it'll be sticking out maybe 1/4 of a half an inch, and I got to come back and slide it back in because it's vibrating the water reservoir. Now, it's not going to vibrate out of the machine, but it's a little annoying because it just comes out just a touch. And so I wish they would just put some sort of, I don't know, compliant aspect to the reservoir so that it just kind of clipped into place or something, or maybe just a friction fit. That way it wouldn't rattle out. Again, that's a very small complaint, but it is one of those things where I'm looking over sometimes. I'm like, oh, did I not put the tank all the way in? And then one day I was watching close, and as it was running, I could actually see it just vibrate out just a touch, and then I got to push it back in. So those are kind of the criticisms I have of the machine. I think my attitude overall toward it has gotten better over time as I have learned to deal with its quirks. So I guess, you know, thinking through what I just said, you do have to be aware that there are some compromises with this machine. There's compromises for aesthetics. There's compromises for size. I don't think there's compromises for build quality or features. But as long as you're aware, hey, you're not going to have a lot of deck height. It's not a big machine. There's not a lot of room. You know, the way the drip tray is designed, I think, was to maintain good visuals on the front. You know, those are kind of some things you got to be aware of. And if you're okay with that, I think you're going to be okay with the machine. I think if you want something with a perfect user experience, well, then that's something that Breville's going to do. You know, you could go with a different higher end manufacturer like, I don't know how to say it, but Lelite or Rancilio, or, you know, some of the machines that are in that range, you know, Profitec or somebody like that. But you're not going to get a machine that looks this nice, quite frankly. Well, and maybe you hate the way this thing looks, but all of them go for the big stainless steel cube design, which, well, I think is kind of ugly. So again, there's some trade-offs there. I don't think that any of those machines will make better espresso, because I think at the end of the day, that's much more going to come down to how you utilize the hardware rather than what the hardware does for you. Because again, I think that the hardware is very capable. All right, so that is going to wrap up my review of the Ascaso Dream PID. If you have any feedback or comments, I'd love to hear it, so leave a comment down below. Otherwise, you know, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I hope that you found it helpful if you're trying to make a decision about purchasing this machine.